Hi, welcome back to the Gemara in Bava Kama, Daf Gimel Amud Bet. We're starting near the bottom of the Amud, shortly before where we left off in class. I'm taking you back a few lines. The sheet that you received in class today is a sheet that tells you which section of the Gemara to cover and has guiding questions for that whole section. This Sefaria source sheet has questions at the bottom, which you can get to this source sheet through Haiku, and those questions at the bottom of the Sefaria source sheet are your homework, which is due Friday. If you finish the homework, so if you finish the questions that are on this Sefaria source sheet, linked in Haiku, then please go back and do the rest of the sheet that you were given in class. If you have any questions or anything's unclear, please feel free to send me an email or call or text me. This section of the Gemara is a little bit confusing. It's definitely got some details that are complicated, so focus on the questions that I asked you in the homework, as well as the guiding questions on the sheet. You can go back and forth between those two. As long as you can answer the questions in the homework, don't worry, don't stress if you don't understand every single detail. So, Michte Krai Lo Kemar Daiki V'Lo Kemar Daiki. We've been discussing this idea that Rav and Shmuel disagree about what Maveh means, and the Psukim don't seem to support either one of them exactly. So, given that, Rav, my time Lo Amar Kishmuel. Why didn't Rav just go ahead and agree with Shmuel about his opinion, since it wasn't the pasuk that convinced him otherwise? Tana shor v'chol milei de shor, because the Mishnah says shor, says ox, and that seems to include all the things about ox. So it's weird that Shmuel puts shen separately on the list, right? Shmuel thinks that Maveh means shen. Ushmuel nami hatanale shor. But for Shmuel also, it says shor, right? So that's a reason for Rav not to agree with Shmuel. It's also a reason for Shmuel not to think the way that Shmuel does. So that's a little strange. Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says, Tana shor lekarno, umaveh l'sheno. When the Mishnah teaches shor, that really means keren. It teaches about shor in terms of the keren damage, and it teaches maveh for the shen damage that a shor can do. So sort of shor really does appear twice on the list, but it's two different aspects of shor. V'hachi kamar. And here's what the Mishnah is really saying. Lo re'i ha-keren she'ein hana al haziko, ki re'i ha-shen she'yesh hana al hazika. The aspects of keren, where there's no enjoyment that the animal gets in doing the damage, it's not like the characteristics or the aspects of shen, where there is enjoyment for the animal in doing the damage. V'lo re'i ha-shen she'ein kavanato lahazik, ki re'i ha-keren she'kavanato lahazik. And shen, where there's no desire by the animal, there's no intent by the animal to do damage. So the aspects of shen, the things that characterize shen as a category of damage, are not the same things that categorize keren as a category of damage, because what characterizes keren is that the animal does want to do damage. This is all part of the answer. This is all part of Rav Yehuda explaining how Shmuel reads the Mishnah, or perhaps Shmuel's version of the Mishnah. Now the Gemara challenges this reading of the Mishnah. V'lav kal v'chomer ho? That really deserves a question mark, exclamation point. Isn't this really a kal v'chomer? Did you really need the Mishnah to tell you this? We don't want the Mishnah to say something that it didn't need to say. And isn't there really a kal v'chomer here? Uma shen she'ein kavanato lahazik chayav, keren she'kavanato lahazik lo kol sheken? Question mark, exclamation point. Here's the kal v'chomer. Uma, just as shen, for which the animal has no desire to do damage, but nonetheless chayav, we hold the owner responsible, we say they have to pay. So keren shekavanato lahazik, keren, where the animal does have intent to do damage, how much more so, right? You shouldn't need to be told, well, shen, she'ein kavanato lahazik, right, you're chayav, and then you're also chayav for keren. No, the Mishnah didn't have to list keren separately, if that's really what characterizes shen, that ein kavanato lahazik, right, the animal doesn't want to do damage, and what characterizes keren is that the animal does want to do damage, then once you list shen, you shouldn't also have to list keren. So this is all part of the challenge, right? It explains why there's a kal v'chomer, and Shmuel's reading of the Mishnah, or Shmuel's version of the Mishnah, doesn't really make sense, because he says that of the four categories listed in the Mishnah, the four avot nezikin, two are shor related. One is Shen, one is Karen, and the distinction between them is that for Shen there's no desire to do damage, and for Karen there is, but really once you knew that you were chayav for Shen, where there's no desire to do damage, you could have deduced, you could have figured out logically that you'd be chayav for Karen. You didn't need the Mishnah to tell you that. Now the Gemara is going to defend that, respond to that challenge, defend Shmuel's reading of the Mishnah. Itzrich. No, we really did need both. Sal K'zai Tzachamina, because I would have thought to say, or I would have believed, Mire Dehava Eved Ve'ama. I would have thought that this is just like Eved Ve'ama, just like a male and female servant. I put this as the answer. Hopefully that's broad, but you'll know that that's the response to the challenge. So for understanding Eved Ve'ama, you need to look at Rashi, which I have down here at the bottom. And Rashi says, this is a few lines later, Afilo Hachib Turin, he quotes from our parak, actually. See that? Kidzarmina beparak hachovel. That's what that stands for. Whoops. That's what those words stand for, or that abbreviation, parak hachovel. So just as it says in parak hachovel, and he gives you the citation, like Haman Daf Pei Zayin Amud Aleph, Ha'eved v'ha'isha p'yatan ra'a. A slave and a woman, I'm not going to translate this exactly right now, we'll talk about it later on, but when they inflict something, it is lesser. Hachovel behen chayav. If somebody injures them, they're chayav, they're fully obligated in all the payments that we've learned about. Behen shechavlu ba'achirim p'turin. But if a slave or a woman injures someone else, they are patur. They don't have to pay those payments. Okay, I'm going back up to the Gemara that we were working on. So, what you would have thought if the Mishnah, according to Shmuel, hadn't listed both Karen and Shen, is you would have thought it's just like Eved and Ama. Because Eved ve'Ama, lav afal gav de kavanatan lahazik, afil hachi p'tirei. Eved and Ama are a case, right? Isn't it the case? Lav, right? Isn't it the case that for Eved and Ama, even though they have kavanah lahazik, even though they intend to do damage, even so, they are patur. Hachanami loshna. This is all part of the response. In other words, just knowing that you're chayav, right? An animal is chayav damage, like with Shen, wouldn't necessarily have led you to believe that it's chayav when it does intend to do damage, like with Karen, because we have cases of people who intend to do damage, and they're still not chayav. Those people are slaves and women, or slaves and female slaves. Rav Ashi now responds to this. Really, since it's a response to the response, I'll call it a challenge again. It goes back to supporting the challenge. Amar Rav Ashi, Atu Eved ve'Ama lav tama rabba yitbahu, Shema yakniteni rabo v'yilech, v'yalich gedisho shel chavero, v'nimtza ze mechayevet rabo me'amana b'chol yom. Rav Ashi says, no, you can't compare the Shen and Karen of Ashur with slaves and women. Because isn't it the case that with Eved and Ama, isn't there an important reason there? Tama Rabba, there's a major reason itbahu in them, right? There's a major reason there. And the reason that they're not, that the slaves are not held liable is as follows. Shema yakni tenu rabo. Maybe their master makes them angry. So the master makes the slave angry, and the slave goes and lights somebody else's crops on fire. And if we hold the master responsible for the slave's debts, which is what it would mean for a slave to be responsible, right? They can't pay their own debts, so it would be holding the master responsible. The slave could cost their master like $100, let's say, every day. In other words, if you're going to hold the master responsible for every purposeful damage their slave does, then slaves have a great way to get back at their masters, because they can always just go and cause damage and be like, haha, I just cost my master tons of money, right? And I got back at him that way. So when it comes to slaves, there's a special reason, and so you wouldn't necessarily make that assumption. And so we've killed the Kal V'chomer in the Mishnah, right? You might actually think, we haven't killed the Kal V'chomer. We've defended the Kal V'chomer in the Mishnah, right? You wouldn't think to compare them, and so you would have really known that in the case of Shen and Keren, once you have Shen, you don't need Keren to be listed. This perpetuates the attack. It uplifts, it supports the attack on Shmuel's reading of the Mishnah. Ela parichachi. We're going to see a girsa change, a change in ways to read these words, but for now we'll just say, here's a new version of the Mishnah. Because we didn't like that one didn't work, there's a Kal V'chomer there, and so the Mishnah shouldn't really have needed to teach us both Shen and Keren. So here's a new version, a new Shmuel version, right? So far we've had two versions of the Mishnah. We have the one that's actually printed, and we have the way Rav Yehuda thinks that Shmuel would read it, but that way didn't make any sense, so we're going to try again. Here's a new Shmuel reading of the Mishnah. So here it is. Lo ri'i ha-Keren shekavanato lahazik, ki ri'i ha-Shen she'en kavanato lahazik. So Keren, where there's intent to damage, doesn't share the characteristics of Shen, where there's no intent to damage. V'lo ri'i ha-Shen sheyesh hana'a lahaziko. And Shen, the characteristics of Shen, where there is hana'ah for doing the damage, are not like the aspects of Keren, are not like the characteristics of Keren, she'en hana'a lahaziko. So this is the new reading of the Mishnah. I put this as the answer. Now we have a new question. And the new question is, V'regel mai? Shaire? And what about regel? Okay, so you've got this new reading of the Mishnah. And in the new reading of the Mishnah, you have shor, which means Shen, and you have mave, which means Keren. The other way around. You have shor, which means Keren, and you have mave, which means Shen, according to Shmuel. But then regel is left out of the Mishnah, right? The only thing that fits under shor is Keren, so regel is not in the Mishnah at all. Did it really leave it out? Shaire? Kishehazik chav hamazik. Right? But no, the Mishnah says kishehazik chav hamazik, right? Whenever it does damage, the damager is obligated. La'atuye regel. Those words in the Mishnah come to include regel. So yeah, it didn't say it, but it means it. So this is the question or challenge. And here's the answer. But the Gemara is not so happy with that answer. Velitne behedya? Question mark, exclamation point. Let it teach it explicitly. Why say that regel is just implied by the Mishnah? That's kind of weird. Ella amar Rava. Rather, Rava says, so gives a new explanation. Tana shor l'raglo, umava l'sheno. When the Mishnah says the word shor, it actually means regel. And when it says the word mave, it actually means shen. V'hachi ka'amar. Ready? Here's a new version of the Mishnah, also according to the way the Gemara is reading Shmuel. Lo ri'i ha-regel, shehezekah matsui, ki ri'i ha-shen, she'en hezekah matsui. So regel, which has frequent, right, its damage is very common. That's not, the characteristics of that, are not like shen, which is not common. V'lo ri'i ha-shen, sheyesh hana'a lahaziko, ki ri'i ha-regel, she'en hana'a lahaziko. And shen, from which the animal gets benefit, gets pleasure, isn't like the characteristics of regel, because in the characteristics of regel, the animal doesn't get pleasure from doing the damage. So this is all part of the answer. V'keren mai? Shaire? And here's a new question, a new challenge. What about Keren? Okay, so in that version, we leave Keren out of the Mishnah because we've got mave, which means shen, and we've got shor, which means regel, But then Karen isn't explicitly mentioned in the Mishnah. Keshehizik chav hamazik. Same answer as before. Well, the Mishnah uses the words keshehizik chav hamazik, that when the damager does damage, they're chayav, and that comes la'atuye Karen. That includes Karen. So yes, true, Karen isn't actually mentioned, but it's implied. But the Gemara doesn't like that. Again, v'litnei behedya. Let it teach it explicitly. Why? That's like kind of weird to just say that Karen is just an implied category here. So we challenge again. B'muadin mitchilatan kamayre. B'tamin levasof. It's b'tamin ulevasof muadin lo kamayre. So the Mishnah is dealing with, kamayre means dealing with or talking about. The Mishnah is only dealing with muadin mitchilatan. Things for which the damager, or cases in which the damager is always responsible. Bitamin ulevasof muadin lo kamari. But it's not dealing with cases where you can have tam and then muad, where you can be not held responsible and then held responsible. If you remember from when we've talked about shor in the past, an animal, the first time it gores, the first time it uses its karen, or the first few times it uses its karen to do damage, it isn't held fully responsible, or the owner isn't held fully responsible, because it's what's called shor tam. It isn't established as a damaging shor, and so the owner isn't held fully responsible. And that lasts until the shor is what's called muad, until it's a shor that is known to do damage, and only then is it held fully responsible. So the Gemara says, yeah, Karen was left out of the Mishnah, according to Shmuel, because Karen doesn't really belong in this picture. These are kinds of damage where you're fully responsible no matter what. And with Karen, you're not fully responsible no matter what, right? There are some types of oxen that are held responsible fully, and some type of oxen that are not held responsible fully. Okay, I'm going to pause here in the video. Again, the sheet that you were given in class continues so that you can continue learning the Gemara once you've answered the questions at the bottom of this source sheet, the bottom of the Sefaria source sheet that's linked in Haiku.